Hey everyone, welcome back to Theonopolis. Today we start construction on the Gardens of the Pharos, and the topic of today's ramble is nature, so let's get into that. Before the true ramble starts however, I want to welcome any newcomers that might have stumbled across my channel or just this video. I hope you're having a good day, and I hope my video doesn't impair on that. But back to the original nature ramble that I intended for the Pharos of Theonopolis, because I want to differentiate it now a little bit from the Pharos of Alexandria. The building is still historically accurate for the most part, but I wanted to make it a bit more in touch with the rest of Theonopolis so that we actually get almost like our own version of the building. If that makes sense, I wanted to tie it a bit more in with Theonopolis, and not that it's just like, oh yeah, it's a monument, it's standing there, but it doesn't, it's in its own bubble, and I didn't want to do that, so that's why I wanted to make a garden at the base. And for that garden I wanted to find out who is the overarching deity of nature. And I found out in my research until now, and please say it if I'm wrong, but I haven't found the overarching deity of nature. And sure, you have Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and so she's associated more with agriculture, which I say is an aspect of nature, it's not nature in its whole. Then you have Artemis, goddess of the wild and the hunt, so I associate her more with, well, the hunt, but also wilderness, forest, which I also think is an aspect of nature, but not nature in its whole. Then you have Persephone, who's queen of the underworld, goddess of something. She is associated with flowers though, I think, which is weird for a queen of the underworld, but then her mother is Demeter, so she gets a pass on that. But her backstory all ties into the appearance of the season, so she is a bit more associated with that. And then you have Gaia, the primordial being of the earth, basically just the earth personified. And I also think she isn't, nature isn't in her epithet or in her name. She isn't associated with nature, but she's associated more with the earth. So, we are basically walking on Gaia according to the ancient Grecians. So again, don't think she's completely tied in with all of nature. She is more with the earth as it is. We walk on her. So because of that, I just wanted to really research a bit more and try and find out who is the overarching deity of nature. But so far, again, I haven't found them. And then I got into some documentaries and some more research, and then I found out that nature, or just ancient Grecian mythology, is very localized. Some big deities that we know today, let's say Hermes was really revered in one place, but in the other he was kind of yeah, he's there, but we aren't really we don't really revere him as much as we do another deity who is then again in another place almost completely unknown. So Grecian mythology, we see it as, as it is today. We see the big goddesses and gods, but back then it was very localized. Some gods and goddesses were revered in one place and totally unknown in the other. And you can also see that in nature, every little stream, little spring has its own god, goddess, or nymph associated with it. I don't know really how to best describe nymphs, but they were basically, let's say they were associated with this kind of tree, then they basically were that tree in human form. I think that's the best way to describe nymphs. But again, if I'm wrong, please say it down below in the comments, but that's how I think about nymphs. But so you had the names associated with, let's say, this stream. So she was revered in the place where that stream was, and she basically was unknown in the rest of Greece. Because again, nature in its revered form is very localized. If you don't know about that stream, of course you don't know about the god, goddess, or nymph associated with that stream. And I, for one, found it, because of that, because it's very localized, in one way it's normal to then have several gods and goddesses associated with like aspects of nature which are like important in one area but not so important in another. But in another way, I found it also weird because the Grecians back then were very, well, I wouldn't say very, but they were superstitious people. Like if an earthquake hit, if some kind of calamity hit, then they were quick to associate it with, you know, the god or goddess or even primordial being that's associated with what happened. So let's say an earthquake happened, then it's associated that you angered Poseidon in a way because the god of the sea is somehow also the god of earthquakes, which in my opinion doesn't just make any sense. Like I would think you maybe angered Gaia because she is the earth, but no, let's give the god of the sea earthquakes. Does any of you guys think that that is also weird? Again, let me know in the comments if you think it's weird that Poseidon is also the god of earthquakes. I mean, god of the sea, so I get like floodings or tsunamis. Like I don't actually think Grecians had tsunamis because, you know, Mediterranean Sea, it's not, you know, let's get back into nature. But again, if you think it's weird that Poseidon is the god of nature, well, not god of nature, god of earthquakes, whoa. This commentary is all over the place. But if you think that's weird, please let me know. But back to nature, as I try to revert this commentary back to the original topic. Again, for any newcomers that are watching this, it's very normal for my commentaries to just go off into weird little ways and just try and sometimes get back into the original topic. But for the nature part, as I said, it's a very localized way of revering it. In that it makes sense that it's like there's no, like, there are different aspects of nature that are revered in places more so than in other places, but then it's also because they are very superstitious people, because they wanted to associate basically any disaster that happened with a god or goddess. For me, it then makes more sense to have like an overarching deity of nature. So if you have a disaster that you can't really associate with one god or goddess, then you can associate it with the overarching deity of nature. So in my way of thinking, that makes no sense to have no overarching deity, but then also on another way it does make sense because it's very localized. But then also because I now state quite frequently that like the Grecians are very superstitious people and very like associate disasters with like upsetting one god or goddess. There were Grecians that wanted to research things, they wanted to find the way things worked, but because there was this overlining, you know, attributing things to gods and mythology, they were rarely like massively hurt. Like for example, we know today that everything revolves around the sun, like the earth revolves around the sun. Back then they thought the earth is the center of the universe and that everything revolves around them. They knew like the planets that they were orbiting something. They thought it was the earth. We know today now that it's the sun. They knew that those planets were there. They have sadly Roman deity names like Mercury, Venus. I mean, though it would be fun if like Grecians conquered the world instead of Romans, then the planets would probably be called like Aphrodite, Hermes and such. But they knew of that, they knew that the planets were orbiting something, but they thought it's orbiting the Earth because, well, let's make it plain and simple. You don't really see that from the Earth, you don't really, you know, from with technology that they had back then, like they had people who were researching that, and some like researchers, or I wouldn't really call them researchers, but like astronomers, or well, those are actually researchers, so I'm basically just, yeah, let's keep it at that. But there were some who were really interested in astronomy, who did research it and who did find out that the earth revolves around the sun, and basically because of that like overlining superstition and mythology based thinking, those people were in the minority. Their ideas weren't really, I wouldn't say accepted, but they were really, you know, a bit of outcasts. They were like yeah, you think that's fine, but this is actually how it works, because that's the majority of the Grecians who thought like, oh, the Earth is the center. But again, don't take this as a fact. Of course, there are, you know, I don't know everything about ancient history or ancient mythology, so I can be completely wrong on that, but I do think or believe that the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe was back then in the majority. So there are some, people who are against that, but again, they were in the minority. So the Grecians were not all superstitious, but according to like their neighbors, such as let's say the Persians and the Egyptians, they were very superstitious. But then it's, you have to think about that, like the Egyptians, the Persians especially, were not the best of friends with Grecians, and so it's very easy to then say like, let's say the Egyptians, they would think like, oh, we are the civilized people and the Grecians are the barbarians, and then the Grecians would think the same about the Egyptians, that the Grecians were civilized and the Egyptians were barbarians, because basically the Egyptians were a group, the Grecians were a group, everyone who's outside those groups are worse. That's just the way of thinking. Like even today, like if you are not with the group, then you are looked at with superstition, looked at as like beneath people or beneath the group. So to quickly shut down this topic, because I want to go back to the original topic of nature, but I take like what Egyptians or Persians say about the Greeks with a little bit of a grain of salt, because there is that group mentality of like, they are not us, so they are, slightly beneath us, or it's easier to, let's say, go to war with people you think are beneath you. So let's cut out that topic completely. Well, not cut out, but let's shut it down now, going back into nature, because of that superstition and the localization. I do see the appeal of just not having like an overarching deity of nature, because then you have your own gods, goddesses, nymphs, and every other thing that you revere, and so those become really treasured to those people. I mean, let's say Athens, I mean, it basically carries that goddess Athena's name, so she was very revered there, and to say that she had an overarching deity would probably go in against the pride that the Athenians had for Athena. So I get that there is no overarching deity, though I do believe that there is, but I just haven't found him or her yet. So again, if any of you guys do know that there might be an overarching deity, or if you can say, oh, there isn't, and you have some like sources to say that, please share them with me, or please just put them down in the comments, because I really like learning about these things. I'm not like, oh, you guys think something different than me. Please shut up. I don't think that way. I rather want to learn things than stay in my own bubble of ignorance. I think some people in today's world should also think like that, but that might also make me seem like a narcissist, but I just think that learning makes people better. But let's get back to the original topic, because I went a little bit on a tangent again, which again is also very normal for my ramble videos. I just like to start talking and just see where it goes, and sometimes I go back into the commentary and I think like, either I'm drunk or I found out something very new, and those possibilities seem appealing to me. But back to the original nature topic. So in my knowledge, there is no overarching deity of nature, and so we have to find a way to, well, I want to find a way, we don't have to, but I want to find a way to still bring like some kind of deity associated with the, well, not the gardens specifically of the Pharos, but just with the whole island. So you would think then, because it's an island in the sea, maybe Poseidon for, defense. Well, basically so that Poseidon just doesn't drag the island into the sea. Or so I like that idea, but then I think the whole Pharos itself is already a bit more associated with Poseidon, so I wanted the island to have its own little bit of a deity. And basically I think the island is too small to have a big deity associated with it, so I basically thought like, alright, let's go down one skill, and so probably the island might be like associated with a nymph for say. In the majority of stories they are beautiful women who turn into plants, or are just, that's a very common thread, that women who are pursued by gods are turning into plants. I feel bad for them, and yeah, women back then were just, yeah. Best to say is today things are better. Well, I say that, but let's be real. Women are still looked at as like, they're still just seen sometimes as things to look at and things to objectify. I mean, we are further along, but I still don't think we are good. But that's my own opinion again. But to the island, and so I wanted to associate it with like nymphs, and that this island was in some way special to them, so that's why there are a few statues of nymphs. And basically I wanted to have it that because of these nymphs, this island has the possibility of a garden, has the possibility of a really abundant nature, and because of that I really think it works in with the story of Theonopolis. So to summarize this ramble, because we are running out of time, we basically went from talking about this overarching nature deity thing to talking about nature in its mythological sense, to then finding out that the island is too small to have a big deity associated with it, so I associate it more with a nymph. And if you guys have any ideas on how to name that nymph, and in so doing the island, please tell me down below in the comments. And for the next video I have something new planned, because I want to give you guys an overview of the entire park so far, which I haven't done so far. So it's going to be the first real-time video, I think, on my channel about just showing you guys the park so far. But that will be for the next video. I hope you're having a good day, I hope you liked the video, and I hope to see you back in the next video. Bye bye! Next video.